Hong Kong, 1972. The most dangerous man in the world stood perfectly still and chose not to move. Bruce Lee, the icon who could break bones with a 1-inch punch, who moved faster than cameras could capture, who had revolutionized martial arts cinema, stood face to face with a challenge that would have made lesser men's reputations. A room full of witnesses, cameras ready, his opponent waiting. And Bruce Lee said no. This is the story nobody tells. The night the dragon refused to breathe fire. By 1972, Bruce Lee had become something unprecedented in cinema history. He wasn't just a movie star, he was a phenomenon that transcended borders, languages, and cultural barriers. The Big Boss had shattered box office records across Asia. Fist of Fury made him a symbol of Chinese pride during a time when Hong Kong still carried the wounds of colonial occupation and the humiliation of the Opium Wars. But with fame came something darker: challengers. They appeared everywhere, at restaurants, outside his home, on film sets. Men who wanted to prove themselves by defeating Bruce Lee. Some were legitimate martial artists seeking to test their skills. Others were thugs looking for reputation. Many were drunk on ego and alcohol, convinced they could be the one to bring down the legend. Bruce had a policy. He didn't fight in public. Not for show, not for ego, not to prove anything to anyone. But this night would test that policy to its absolute limit. The setting was a private gathering at a prominent businessman's estate in Kowloon. Hong Kong's elite had assembled: film producers, wealthy merchants, politicians, and among them, several martial artists from competing schools. The atmosphere was cordial on the surface, but underneath ran currents of rivalry, jealousy, and the eternal question that haunted Bruce Lee everywhere he went: is he really that good? Among the guests was a man we'll call Master Wong, a respected practitioner of Hung Gar Kung Fu, a traditional style known for its powerful horse stances and iron body conditioning. Wong was in his 50s, respected in the martial arts community, and he had made no secret of his disdain for Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do philosophy. To Wong and traditionalists like him, Bruce's approach was heresy. Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist, rejected rigid forms and classical techniques. Bruce famously said, "Absorb what is useful, discard what is useless, add what is specifically your own." To masters who had spent decades preserving ancient fighting systems, this was arrogant dismissal of wisdom accumulated over centuries. The evening progressed with polite conversation, expensive whiskey, and the subtle posturing of powerful men. Bruce, as always, remained composed. He spoke about his upcoming film Enter the Dragon, the first major Hollywood-Hong Kong co-production. He discussed philosophy, the nature of water, the importance of being formless. Then Master Wong stood up. "Mr. Lee," he said, his voice cutting through the ambient conversation, "you speak beautifully about fighting, but speaking and doing are different things." The room went silent. Every eye turned to Bruce. Wong continued, "I have watched your films. Very impressive choreography. But cinema is not reality. In my school, we train for real combat. Traditional methods, proven over generations, not theatrical acrobatics." The challenge had been issued. In front of Hong Kong's elite, in front of film industry power brokers, in front of rivals and allies alike. Bruce's face remained neutral, but those who knew him well could see the slight tightening around his eyes. His wife Linda, present that evening, later recalled feeling her stomach drop. She knew the position her husband had just been placed in. Refuse, and he'd appear afraid. Accept, and he'd be reduced to a circus performer, validating every challenger who came after. "Master Wong," Bruce replied, his voice calm. "I have great respect for traditional kung fu. I studied Wing Chun under Yip Man for years, but I don't fight for entertainment." "Of course," Wong said, a slight smile on his face. "Perhaps the films require too much energy. Perhaps there's none left for actual combat." The insult was carefully crafted, not direct enough to provoke a physical response, but sharp enough to draw blood from reputation. Several people in the room shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward, anticipating confrontation. Bruce stood up. For a moment, everyone thought it was happening. The greatest martial artist of the age, about to demonstrate his skills against a traditional master. Cameras were quietly retrieved from bags. People positioned themselves for better views. And then, Bruce Lee did something that shocked everyone more than any punch could have. He bowed respectfully to Master Wong and said, "I must decline. I came here as a guest, not a performer. If you're interested in understanding Jeet Kune Do, I'm happy to discuss it. But I won't fight tonight." To understand why Bruce refused to fight that night, you have to understand what he had become by 1972. He wasn't just skilled, he was dangerously skilled. His training had evolved beyond sport or art into something closer to pure combat efficiency. His famous 1-inch punch could generate 350 pounds of force, enough to send a man flying backward or break ribs. His speed, measured in laboratory conditions, showed he could execute a punch from rest position in 0.05 seconds, faster than most people's reaction time. He could kick a 300-pound heavy bag to the ceiling. His sidekick could reportedly dent cars. More importantly, Bruce had studied body mechanics, pressure points, and the most efficient ways to incapacitate opponents. He knew exactly how much force, applied where, would tear ligaments, fracture bones, or cause internal damage. He had trained to exploit weaknesses instinctively, without thinking. Fighting Master Wong wouldn't have been a contest. It would have been an assault. Bruce knew this. He knew that if he engaged, his body would react with the full force of his training. There would be no pulling punches in front of a crowd. His muscle memory would take over. And the outcome wouldn't be a friendly sparring match. It would be a man in his 50s being seriously injured by someone half his age, faster, stronger, and trained in methods specifically designed to neutralize traditional stances. The victory would be hollow. The damage would be real. And the precedent, that Bruce Lee could be goaded into fighting by public challenges, would haunt him forever. Bruce Lee's martial arts philosophy extended far beyond fighting techniques. He had spent years studying Eastern philosophy, reading Krishnamurti, Alan Watts, and Taoist texts. He kept extensive journals where he wrestled with questions about the nature of combat, the ego, and what it meant to truly master oneself. One entry from his notebooks, written around this time period, reads, "The ultimate aim of martial arts is not having to use them. A warrior who knows he can destroy his opponent has no need to prove it. The proof is in the restraint." This wasn't pacifism. Bruce believed absolutely in the effectiveness of his art. He trained obsessively, constantly refining techniques, pushing his body to peak condition. But he distinguished between necessary combat, defending oneself or others, and ego-driven displays. The night he refused Master Wong, Bruce was practicing the highest form of martial arts, self-mastery. He later told his close friend and student, Dan Inosanto, "The hardest opponent to defeat is yourself. Your ego tells you to fight, to prove, to demonstrate. But that's the ego talking, not the warrior. A real warrior fights only when there's no other choice." This philosophy separated Bruce from many martial artists of his era. Hong Kong's martial arts scene in the 1960s and 70s was intensely competitive, often violent. Challenge matches happened regularly, sometimes resulting in serious injuries or death. Rival schools settled disputes through combat. Reputations were built on victories. Bruce rejected this entire paradigm. He didn't need to prove Jeet Kune Do's effectiveness through public brawls. He proved it through his films, which reached millions. Through his teaching, which influenced generations. Through his writing, which articulated a philosophy that transcended fighting. But the decision to walk away came with consequences. The rumors persisted. In Hong Kong's gossip-driven entertainment industry, the story morphed and evolved. Some versions claimed Bruce had been shaking with fear. Others said Master Wong had techniques that would have defeated him. Traditional martial arts schools used the incident as evidence that modern approaches were inferior to classical methods. Bruce's film career was at a critical juncture. Enter the Dragon was filming, representing his breakthrough into Hollywood. The producers needed him to maintain his image as an invincible fighter. Any perception of weakness could undermine the film's marketing. His wife Linda later revealed that this period was one of the most stressful of Bruce's life. The pressure came from all directions. From film studios wanting him to maintain his tough image, from martial arts rivals seeking to diminish his reputation, from fans expecting him to be the invincible hero from the screen, from challengers appearing constantly testing his patience. The price of being Bruce Lee was that he could never just be a man. He had to be the legend, constantly, exhaustingly. And yet, he continued to choose restraint. Multiple other challenges came in the months following the Master Wong incident. Each time, Bruce declined public confrontations. He would sometimes invite serious martial artists to private sessions at his school, where he would demonstrate techniques in a controlled environment. But public fighting? Never. Years later, after Bruce's tragic death in 1973, Master Wong gave an interview to a Hong Kong martial arts magazine. By then, the bravado had faded. Wong was asked about that night at the gathering, about the challenge he'd issued. His response was surprising. "I was foolish. I let ego and jealousy cloud my judgment. Bruce Lee showed me something that night that all my years of traditional training hadn't taught me. That the greatest strength is knowing when not to use your strength. I challenged him to prove I was relevant, to show that traditional methods still mattered. He could have destroyed me in seconds, and we both knew it. By walking away, he gave me something more valuable than a beating. He gave me a lesson in humility." This was the hidden wisdom in Bruce's refusal. He hadn't just avoided a fight. He'd taught without teaching, demonstrated without demonstrating. The incident became a teaching story in martial arts circles, though the lesson depended on who was telling it. For some, it proved that traditional respect and discipline mattered more than ego. For others, it showed that true mastery includes knowing when to fight and when to walk away. Bruce's students at the Jun Fan Gung Fu Institute learned the story directly from him. He used it to illustrate a principle he repeated often. The purpose of Jeet Kune Do is not to add more techniques, but to subtract, to remove what's unnecessary. And often, what's most unnecessary is the fight itself. To fully understand Bruce's decision, you have to see it within the larger context of his life mission. He wasn't trying to be the toughest fighter in Hong Kong. He was trying to bridge East and West, to break down barriers, to prove that an Asian man could be a leading man in Hollywood, to spread a philosophy of personal liberation through martial arts. Every public brawl would have reduced him to a street fighter. Every accepted challenge would have reinforced the stereotype of Asians as exotic martial artists rather than complex human beings. Bruce was fighting a different battle, a cultural one, a philosophical one, and he understood that restraint served that mission better than violence. His films carried messages beyond the fight scenes. They addressed colonialism, racism, cultural identity, personal freedom. Fist of Fury showed a Chinese hero standing up to Japanese occupiers, resonating with audiences who had lived through that trauma. Enter the Dragon positioned an Asian actor as the unquestioned hero in an international cast. These achievements required more than physical prowess. They required strategy, patience, and the wisdom to choose battles carefully. The night Bruce refused to fight Master Wong, he was protecting something larger than his reputation. He was protecting his mission. And in doing so, he demonstrated a level of mastery that went beyond kicks and punches. Bruce Lee died on July 20th, 1973, just weeks before Enter the Dragon premiered. He was 32 years old. The official cause was cerebral edema, though conspiracy theories have persisted for decades. His death shocked the world and ensured his immortality as a cultural icon. In the 5 decades since, his influence has only grown. His martial arts philosophy influenced everyone from UFC fighters to military combat instructors. His films continue to inspire new generations. His writings on self-actualization and personal expression transcend martial arts, offering wisdom applicable to any discipline. But the story of the night he refused to fight remains lesser known, overshadowed by tales of his legendary speed, his incredible physique, his revolutionary techniques. Yet this story reveals something essential about who Bruce Lee actually was, beneath the legend. He was a man trying to master himself, not just his art. A philosopher who happened to be history's most effective fighter. A teacher who understood that sometimes the most powerful lesson is demonstrated through absence of action. Master Wong's later reflections captured this. I tried to diminish Bruce Lee that night. Instead, he elevated me by refusing to diminish himself. That's the difference between a fighter and a warrior. A fighter proves himself through combat. A warrior proves himself through wisdom. So why did Bruce Lee refuse to fight that night? The answer has layers. On the surface level, he refused because fighting Master Wong would have accomplished nothing positive. It would have been beating an older man for ego, setting a precedent for endless challenges, reducing martial arts to spectacle. On a deeper level, he refused because he had evolved beyond needing validation through combat. His confidence was absolute, not arrogant, but grounded in thousands of hours of training, study, and practical application. He had nothing to prove to anyone, including himself. On the deepest level, he refused because it aligned with his philosophy of water, being formless, adapting to the situation, flowing around obstacles rather than crashing through them. Fighting would have been rigid, predictable, ego-driven. Walking away was fluid, unexpected, controlled. The night Bruce Lee refused to fight was the night he demonstrated the highest level of martial arts: complete self-mastery. The greatest warrior wins without fighting. The deadliest weapon chooses not to fire. The ultimate master knows that true power lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to create. Bruce Lee, the man who could have beaten anyone in that room without breaking a sweat, chose peace. And in doing so, he won a victory that no punch could ever achieve. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more from the Path of the Warrior Mind.